Friday Night Local. Come in.
From Adult Books on the eve of their release of the album Grecian Urn. It's absolutely fantastic. Do you want to tell everybody a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I play guitar and sing in adult books, and yeah, that's about it.
Keep it simple, easy way to put it. Yeah. So, Give us a little bit about the history of the album to start off with. When did the idea for Grecian Urn kind of originate?
So the album is sort of a mix of old and new. Some of the songs on it, the ideas go back almost 10 years. I just had a lot of bits and pieces floating around that I had wanted to make into like fully fleshed songs for a long time, and at this point, it just like more or less came together in a way that I wanted, and I was happy with that.
Mm. And I mean, the product is fantastic. It stands for itself. I've been listening to it since its release, and it just absolutely blew me away. Um, I mean, you guys have had so much development, starting the band back in 2012, if I'm not wrong, with the self-titled release. Has it been a long journey? Do you think you've had to change over that period a lot?
I think the band has definitely changed a lot since that time. The guys that I originally started the band with, we all came from a more punk background, and I think the early music reflects that more. But I think now I'm really making the kind of music that I always wanted to. Just
Mm,
playing fast and loud was something that came easier to us. Whereas now, I I'm a, I think we're better capable of doing something a little more nuanced, I guess.
mm, mm. I mean, the punk. I think the punk roots are so blatant in the name alone. I mean, it's a very famous X song, and I'm a big
Right.
fan
Yeah.
of X. I kind of grew up with the early punk bands, and some of my favorite bands from the era, Minutemen, bands like that as well.
Right.
And I think you're completely saying that correctly about how it's developed and it's more your own thing almost now. Because I think this album is quite radically different from even your previous release, Running from the Blows. Mm,
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's a definite continuation from Running from the Blows, but yeah. I mean, I think with this album, I was definitely interested in doing something that I feel like it didn't need to be such a like band heavy guitar forward stuff. So
mm,
I had a lot more fun, playing around with arrangements and things like that.
mm. I think as well the influence of synths was something that really kind of came across heavily as well on the recent release. That wasn't necessarily prevalent on the previous releases. But do you think it's something that you've kind of taken more control of, just the layering and the kind of background of it itself, or?
I'm really bad at playing synth, but so it's not something that comes naturally to me, definitely. But um, I definitely enjoy it, and I enjoy experimenting with that stuff in the studio. But it's very much like there's a lot of layering going on because I can't even play chords. You know what I mean? So it's just like we're doing like
Mm,
one note at a time. Um,
mm,
but yeah, I think it adds a nice texture that I like in the new music.
mm. Do you think then it's the kind of influences themselves have strayed further from the kind of post punk of the 1970s and 1980s? And do you think you'd even classify yourself as post punk anymore?
That's a good question. I think my influences are probably pretty much the same. I mean, I never go into writing music with a specific idea, like I want to sound like this band or I want to write a song that sounds like this song. But I mean, I do always. I mean, my favorite bands are still, the Smiths, New Order, Wire. But as
Mm,
far as like, do I consider us a post punk band? Um, I don't know. I mean, I do in a very literal sense of like, yeah, we were. we come from that punk background, and we've kind of moved beyond that. But I don't necessarily want to be tied to like a specific genre,
Mm,
and I don't think that we necessarily have a lot in common with a lot of bands that are called post punk nowadays.
mm. Absolutely. I think that's something that really kind of was highlighted to me on the new album. I mean, compared to bands like Proto Martyr or some of the other kind of bigger bands that are coming up in the post punk scene, you guys are really doing something unique. You almost feel like a more natural continuation of the music that was being released in the 70s and 80s than some of the more modern releases. And it's really amazing. I mean, my mum kind of grew up in the era of, the big 1970s, 1980s television, bands like that. And I showed her some of your music and she was just blown away. She was just thinking, wow, finally a band that's actually kind of recapturing that original spirit. Mm,
Thanks, I appreciate that. I mean, yeah, the thing. I mean, I do like a lot of current post punk bands, but I think it has a tendency to get really like genre-y in a way. You know what I mean? Where it
mm,
I don't know.
Yeah.
Not to criticize any bands, but it becomes one note at times. Whereas, I mean, I don't
Do you
want to do
think
that.
genres
I
are a
think I'm.
bit of a problem?
What's that?
So, do you think genres are a bit of a problem, like that classification?
mm,
Um, I think it is a problem when bands feel too tied to them or feel like they need to conform to a specific sound, which
mm,
I don't know if that's the case often. But I mean, I guess with my own thing is, yeah. I mean, and I think bands like the Smiths that I really like. It's more about the songwriting itself versus specific genre conventions.
mm. I mean, do you think there's a difference between music scenes and music genres as well? Do you think one is kind of more important than the other, would you say?
Um, they're definitely tied together, and I think that's good and bad. Like definitely when we were starting as a band, it felt really good to be part of a pretty like thriving music scene here in LA, and
Mm,
it was inspiring. And I think it was a lot of bands like pushing each other to get better and maybe exploring new things together. So in a way, like yeah, I think this scene does sort of like push the genre aspect.
mm,
Um,
mm.
but yeah, I mean, I think it's a good thing overall in that scenario.
Mm. I think people like to group, especially with music, they like to group things together in their head that necessarily, doesn't necessarily reflect how the artist would view their own music as well. Um,
Right.
as well, just to turn to,
Sorry.
mm, pardon?
I was gonna say, yeah, I was listening to another interview with the singer of Sleaford Mods, which I thought was really interesting
Mm,
because
mm.
that band gets tied in so much with like the current post punk scene, and he's just like, dude, I don't like any of that music. You know what I mean? He was like, I grew up listening to hip hop or whatever,
Mm,
but so yeah, it's funny the way that genres get put on people, which aren't necessarily like reflective of their own interests, I guess.
Yeah.
mm. That's definitely true. I think one way you guys kind of as well distance yourself from that is your very kind of unique music videos. I was really enjoying some of the older ones as well. I was watching the music video for Firewalking today, and kind of the Peaks influence there. That's one of my favorite shows. So that was really cool to see. And how was that process? And how do you find kind of making music videos in general?
That one was really hard. We basically took a warehouse and built the set from scratch. So we painted the floors like with the black and white chevron pattern. We bought those huge red velvet curtains and did the lighting ourselves. Um, I mean, and it was all my friend Tom Conshot's vision. But yeah, it was a lot of hard work. But I was like kind of blown away with how it turned out. Because when we were doing it, I was like, "There's no way this is going to turn out good." But I thought it turned out really good.
it looked so professional. Like I was watching it, I was just stunned. I was like, I can't believe that you guys have actually made it look so authentic almost. It was so props to you
Yeah.
for that. Mm.
Well, he
Do you think
had he pulled a lot of good connections. Like he borrowed a friend's red cam, and like he did like a legit casting call, and like got all these like really good actors to basically work for free. So I don't know. We did it on a small budget, but he definitely pulled a lot of strings and made it work.
Oh, is the internet all right for you? I feel like his is frozen.
Um,
Sorry, that was
I,
my
Oh, there we go.
internet's just frozen there.
There we
oh yeah,
go.
We've been
yeah.
having power cuts recently.
No worries.
Sorry about that. I did catch your answer. Do you want to carry on with what you were saying?
Did I cut out?
I think it was. I think it was on my end. We'll just go on with another question. Don't worry. We'll fix it in the editing process.
Yeah,
So
it's all
just
right.
thinking about
Okay,
music
no worries.
videos. Thinking about music videos as well. I mean, the most recent ones, I was really enjoying those as well. Florence, especially. Um, what do you think is so different about these? Because I think they've definitely got such a different tone from the earlier music videos.
The Florence video was directed by my friend Tony Acosta, um, and he did it all on Super 8, so it's definitely a lot
Mm,
different look in the film quality. But that one was just where the other ones it was like way more concept driven. This one, like, we're basically just we went out and shot like 4 rolls of Super 8 and just kind of did it on the fly, which I think I enjoyed because it was way more low key and just kind of hanging out.
mm.
Do you think it's important to make videos like that with, friends of yours, like keeping it a very close circle? Like, is that important to you?
Um, I mean, I generally prefer it because I mean it just makes it way more comfortable for me. For me, like I'm already like not so great in front of the camera.
Mm,
So having my friends do it is definitely it makes it more comfortable for me.
mm. Do you find it easier to kind of perform then, or do you find it kind of easier to just record the songs and release, or what's kind of the easiest thing
Um,
for you in general?
I definitely enjoy the writing and recording process the most. Um,
Mm,
and I have to say it has been for me kind of a nice break during COVID. Um, just because it gave me a ton of time to just work on that, you know what I mean? And I found myself,
mm,
to be honest, like not really missing playing live too much at all.
mm,
I
mm,
think a lot of acts are very live driven, but it gives people like you that love that recording process just a chance to create a whole lot of music. Like we hear so many musicians, how much they're creating. Are you inspired by that?
Um, yeah, I know. I guess it's like two different things because I know a lot of friends and stuff who really missed the live aspect. But I guess it's just two different approaches to music. Like, there are some bands that just like you're not gonna get it unless you see the live act. But
mm, mm,
yeah, I think for my music personally, I think it's best on record. I would for me, I prefer to have something that maybe I can't even pull off live. I just think when you're in the studio, like it's fair game. Do whatever you can to make the best record
mm,
possible.
mm. Absolutely. I think for me, especially listening to it, it just stood out as almost the perfect road trip album. Just kind of, being on the road with your friends and going off to have a bit of fun and experience new things, and just the kind of the drivingness in the music as well, and just how explosive it can be at points. It almost feels like a journey in itself. Mm,
Thanks. I appreciate that. I I hadn't really thought of it that way, but I do love road trips, so that's good.
mm, mm.
Was
I
there
think
a
as well. I
certain
mean,
mood you had for the album, or sorry, was there a certain like mood you intended for the album to be received in, or certain event or anything like that?
Um, Not really. It's something that I feel like I should work on more, but I never really think in terms of like songs and groups where this group of songs is going to be this album. It came down to like we had like 20 songs going into recording and just kind of whittled it down to the best ones. I think a lot of them are thematically similar just because I wrote them kind of in a similar
mm,
headspace. So a lot of them are kind of darker because I think I wrote them in a time when I was, I just moved to LA and didn't know too many people. I was lonely and I was just writing a lot. And so I guess that is reflected in the music, maybe.
Mm.
mm. Do you think that's something then that kind of formed the experience in a larger way than it would have when you released the previous projects? Do you think maybe that was kind of the reason for the hiatus to develop the ideas and just kind of gain the experience from life itself?
Um, I don't know. I mean, the hiatus itself was more due to just things outside my control. Like
Mm,
the recording process ended up taking a lot longer than expected, and then there's just issues with labels and issues with the actual release. So that's the kind of stuff for me that is just like not fun at all about music.
mm,
Um, and now that I'm done with that, it feels really good, because it becomes like this almost this like mental block, like where I felt like I couldn't write music until this record came out, and once this record was in motion, it just like was this huge weight lifted off my shoulder, and I felt like I could finally put my creative energy into new things.
mm. Does that mean we've got some exciting new releases to look forward to in the future then?
I hope so, and I hope it's a lot sooner than the break between the last
Mm,
record. Um, but yeah, I'm hoping to go back in the studio soon. I have more than enough music for a new record, so
mm.
hopefully we can get the wheels in motion soon.
Fingers crossed. And just as we kind of come towards the end of the interview as well, there's just one thing I wanted to touch on that just absolutely blew me away in reading about this album, and it was the fact that your mastering was done by an absolute legend, Dave Cooley. I mean, some of the albums that man has touched in the past, absolutely incredible. So, how was that experience?
Dave is a really cool guy, and I'm kind of an annoying person to work with. I feel like because I have a lot of questions,
Mm,
but he's just like, I mean, and the fact that he even like gives me the time of day to ask him dumb questions, I think is really nice and says a lot about
mm,
him. But not with this record, but with the last record, we actually went into his home studio, which is like just like super nice, like feels like a cave in there, like in his basement in his house, and he's got just like
mm,
this crazy setup that you would never expect in someone's house. But yeah, he's really cool.
mm. It's amazing. I mean, some of those projects he's done, like I said, Dilla's Donuts and Mad Villainy, and some of the most iconic releases of all time. And actually, I think this new album is so unique in itself, and it almost complements your vision so well. I mean, it came out sounding so perfectly produced. So again, congrats. It sounds like you two have worked really well together, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, um, Dave is just so good at what he does. Like it really doesn't take too much on my end. You know what I mean? Like
Mm,
I think he just has his like magic touch where you could give him something and it just has that intangible quality that just he makes it all come together, you know.
Fantastic. And just as we kind of wrap up as well, is there anything you want to shout out? Any kind of gigs you've got coming up, possible releases, or even any bands you'd like our listeners to kind of go out and check out?
No gigs at the moment. I'm sure that'll change soon as things start to open in LA. But yeah, I wanna give a shout out to Pete at Taxi Gosh Records. He was just been the biggest help with putting this record out, and yeah, he's just like the nicest guy, and just kind of like went along with all of our ideas, and yeah, really appreciate him for that.
Fantastic. I think people behind the scenes don't necessarily get shouted out that often, and they absolutely should, because in music in a way as a community and releases, it's not just one person doing it a lot of the time. There are so many wheels in motion at the same time. So like I completely mirror what you're saying, and thank you everybody who kind of helped you put it together. And again, Nick, thank you so much for kind of taking the time to chat to us. It's been amazing to kind of get some insight on the album and in the history of the band itself. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great. If there's anything you need in the future, we're always open for contact, future interviews, or if you'd like us to play a song on the podcast, we can do that as well.
Yeah, feel free. Yeah, whatever you guys want to do.
Fantastic. Well, it's been a pleasure, and I hope you have an absolutely great evening, morning, whatever it is there.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, you too.
Great. Okay.
Right, take it easy. Bye
Take
bye.
care. Take care.
All right.
Bye.